All right, so today I heard a lot, and I mean a lot, about the possibility of the Browns being one of the teams in on Ndamukong Suh, right? You see it here on CBS Sports. It was reported widely by the national media that the Browns were interested, but interestingly enough, almost immediately, a bulk of the local media came out and refuted that, right? And I think that's important because when you get like four reporters all saying the same thing from the local side, it's usually going to be more accurate from that standpoint, just because the national media, they're usually a little bit behind on what the team feels, right? So they're putting two and two together, but they're a little bit behind because they're not working with the team day to day. There's enough people out here saying that the Browns aren't interested or in the running for this that I believe it. And I believe it for other reasons that are football reasons. So I thought today that I would go through this whole thing and talk about why it is that I don't feel like the Cleveland Browns are ultimately going to be interested in Ndamukong Suh. Now, I'm explaining this from the Cleveland Browns perspective. I personally would not mind signing Ndamukong Suh, but I can understand why the organization will feel different. So I'm going to explain it. Before I explain it, one, shout out to the subscribers. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Also, shout out to the Patreon members. But also, I want to kind of explain to some people why people would want Ndamukong Suh, right? Ndamukong Suh is a big body. He's a established defensive tackle. He's another guy that could be a threat from a pass rushing standpoint, and you would assume because of his size he would be able to still be usable in the run game. The Browns don't have any, big names on the interior of the defensive line. They have Perrion Winfrey right now, Jordan Elliott, Sheldon Day. Like, these are names that don't really move the needle for most people who watch the NFL, who don't follow the Browns like day to day. These names don't move the needle, even though I think one of those names, not just Perrion, being a little bit disrespected in that whole rotation. But I can understand why people aren't really aware of this person in that conversation. But you look at that, and again, I kind of said this in the last video, right? A lot of football fans, and this is not their fault, this is how a lot of people are just taught to watch football or taught to talk about football. They look at the roster and they go through each position group and they go, this week's this strong, this is weak, this is strong, and they kind of make their value assessment on what a team's weaknesses are because of that. But every year that we do that, we kind of realize that that's not accurate, because how many years, like the Bengals, for example, right? You can look at the Bengals defense from last year and point out their defensive backs and go, well, there's going to be a weakness there, right? But schematically, they were able to make that a non-factor, even a positive at some points, because they had the proper scheme, the proper players for that scheme, right? I think a lot gets put onto the top heaviness of a roster. A lot gets put on to how the names look on the roster, but we don't necessarily talk about how things fit schematically correctly. I think we kind of use schematic scheme as like a catch-all term to say why we don't like something and explain it's just a scheme, but I don't think we actually apply scheme correctly in a lot of these conversations, which leads to a lot of confusion on what's actually the problem. And when you look at the Browns roster, defensive back is one of those places you can look at and say, oh, that's going to be a problem for them. I mean, not defensive back, my bad. Defensive interior lineman. But knowing how the scheme is ran, right, knowing that they're going to move Myles Garrett inside and outside, and also knowing that they have Myles Garrett on the defensive line. And if a team thinks that the best way to beat the Cleveland Browns is to run the football and get the ball closer to Myles Garrett, I think that's a bet that the Browns are willing to make, right, especially with Jadeveon Clowney on the other side. So I get why people want this. I personally would not mind this, but I also understand why the team would not do this. Now, why would a team not want a guy like Ndamukong Suh? It's a good question to ask, right? It is a strong question to ask. All right, well, let's pull up Ndamukong Suh's Pro Football Focus page, right? If you look here, it's pretty mediocre from the last year. His 2021 grades, he had a 49.4 overall, a 50.2 in run defense, and a 54.2 in pass rush. It's also notable, Ndamukong Suh, 35 years old, 35 and a half years old. By the time the season starts, he's going to be closer to 36. So there is also that. So didn't play great last year. Seemed like a steep drop-off from what has already been a couple of steep drop-offs in his play. And now he's going to be about 36 by the time the season starts. There's concerns, right? And Ndamukong Suh also more of a 3-4 interior end than he is a 3-tech, like a true 3-tech, even though in a 4-3 at least. But he's been around long enough to where that's not a huge problem. But again, Ndamukong Suh, almost 36. That's old for NFL terms. And if you look at his grade chart towards the end of the season, especially the end of the regular season, he was awful. Like 43, 33.9 right here. Just some really bad grades put up by him. From an analytical standpoint. And also look at the run defense, right? The reason you would want to bring in a body like Ndamukong Suh is for run defense. That's what everybody tells me. And he's been bad at that this last year, right? You can look at his grades from the years past, and it's another thing that pops up as a bit of an issue, right? Where he had pretty much, this is the prime of his career, ended around 2015. Well, no, the prime of his career ended around 2017. And then it was a drop off in 2018. There's been a drop off in 2019. There's been a drop off in 2020. And there's been a drop off, a big drop off in 2021. You look at his run defense, same story, right? Elite in 2017. Pretty damn good in 2018. 2019, he was good. 2020, he was all right. 2021, he was terrible. So you see the consistent drop off year after year. You can't see what is a trend of 5 years in the deficit for a player and assume that you're going to get him into positive in a situation that's not that much different than what he played at in Tampa Bay. This is not taking a player who is playing for nothing. This is not taking a player who is playing in a bad situation and then putting him in a good situation. This is taking a player who is in a great situation and has declined every year. So that's part of the reason, right? It looks like he's in decline. It looks like he don't got much left in the tank. He's going to be more expensive than what you already have on a roster. He's older. It's another duct tape solution. I think at this point, if you're the Cleveland Browns, one, you want to get your younger guys in there, guys you feel like can have a future with this team, rather than keep going back to those 1-year duct tape solutions in the interior. Two, you have a bunch of young dudes in the interior of your defensive line that you want to give a shot. And how much better is Ndamukong Suh right now than any of those guys? That's a big question, right? We know the name is bigger with Ndamukong Suh, but you look at Taven Bryant and his Pro Football Focus grade from 2021, it's better than Ndamukong Suh's was. Not like he's great. The run defense grade's awful from 2020, like 44.4. But the defensive grade, 56.6. He's technically a better pass rusher, or at least Pro Football Focus thinks he's a better pass rusher than than Ndamukong Suh, right? That adds into it. Another player that factors into this is you want a veteran player. You want an interior guy who's going to be able to handle some of the heavier stuff in there and also do a little bit of pass rush and kind of just be that extra guy in that rotation for the Browns. Well, you already have that. I think they feel like at least they already have that. And a guy that nobody talks about in Sheldon Day, who they brought back, right? Sheldon Day, if you look at his grade, much better than Ndamukong Suh, mainly because Ndamukong had a really bad grade, 64.7. He's on the uptick instead of the down. He's only 28 years old. The run defense grade is better. The pass rush grade is better. And he fits what the Browns want, which is a smaller, more athletic, more versatile, well, not versatile, but more downhill kind of defensive interior lineman. That's kind of what the Browns are looking for at that position. I don't think I don't think Ndamukong Suh fits the bill. Me personally, would I love to throw as many bodies on the defensive line as possible? Yes, because I think dominating the line of scrimmage is a surefire way to make sure you dominate games in the NFL. But I have a different philosophy than Joe Woods, and Joe Woods is the one in charge of this defense, and ultimately he needs to get the pieces that are right for his philosophy on defense. So he would rather probably have more DBs. I honestly think it's more realistic that the Browns would bring back somebody like a Joe Hayden than they would an Ndamukong Suh, just because it makes sense to bring in Joe Hayden because you can add another boundary corner. He could be another flex safety. He could also play in the inside, outside. He's a smart enough player to be helpful and everything else. And Ndamukong brings all of that to the table on his side, even though he's been in decline massively the last few years. But the thing that Ndamukong brings is just something that's not super valued by Joe Woods' scheme, right? Joe Woods wants more DBs out there. He wants to be more athletic. He wants to smother you in coverage so he can win with 4 up front. That's what Joe Woods' defense is about. It's not aggressive. It's not a downhill attack. It's not the Greg Williams defense, right? It's not going to be a lot of zero blitzes and all of that foolishness that Greg Williams used to run out here. But it's going to be a lot of smothering by coverage, a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 6, and a lot of quarters, right? And a lot of zone to smother teams into being behind the sticks. And if a team decides that they want to run to get away from that, cool, we got Myles Garrett. There's a good chance that if you give him enough rundowns, he'll get you behind the sticks enough to be able to make the difference in the game for the defense. Also, Jadeveon Clowney on the other side, right? They're taking that bet. So defensive interior lineman just isn't valued in the same way. And what they want from their interior defensive lineman isn't a run stuffer. They feel like they have that settled at the edges and with the linebacking position. They want defensive interior linemen that can get upfield and pressure, right? Perion Winfrey, uphill guy. That's what Jordan Elliott was supposed to be coming out of college. Same thing with Tommy Togiai. If you notice, they keep these defensive linemen around 310 to 290, right? They don't have the heavy guys. They don't bring in the 325, the 330 guys in the interior because that's not what they're looking for. They're not looking for gap fillers. And when they did in Andrew Billings, right, they got a gap filler in him. He was off the team by week 6. So that's not what they want. That's not what they feel like works with this scheme and with this defense. It was the 5th ranked defense in football last year. So you have to give this team the benefit of the doubt that what they are planning does work because it worked really effectively, especially at the end of last year. But that's why I don't think ultimately the Browns are going to be interested in bringing in Ndamukong Suh on top of everybody who covers the team telling you that the Browns are not interested in Ndamukong Suh. I don't know. I don't have inside sources or anything like that. I'm just looking at this from a football perspective and seeing if it makes or does not make sense for the Browns to pursue this. But that's my thoughts on this. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.